Hi, folks. Welcome to Sunday's edition of the iWrite Radio podcast stroke videocast. Today's a pretty busy day. I think, there's about 6 or 7 different articles in the National. So what we're going to do is going to have a chat about Biden becoming president-elect of the USA, which I think will lead us into Brexit, which will lead us into Ireland, which will no doubt lead us into a unified Ireland, hence Scottish independence, etc., etc. Peter Bell's got a particularly interesting blog out that we'll have a chat about as well. There's a possibility we'll have Peter on as a guest or an interview with Peter midweek sometime, I think. So the presidential election finally has decided that Joe Biden is going to be the next president of the United States. That might be a little premature. There hasn't actually been a civil war in America yet. We may have to wait for the outcome of that. If Donald Trump keeps inciting his base to turn up at demos with guns. Happy about Biden becoming president then, Stuart?
Thank goodness was what I said. Thank goodness. He's old school Democrat, and it's certainly, goodness me, thank goodness Trump is no longer going to be president for the next 4 years. That would have been awful. Yes, I'm not on. Let's be honest. When Tony Blair and New Labour took over power in this country, everyone 20 years younger than me and under was dancing on the streets of Wraith. They were doing that all over social media here. Most of my friends were very, very happy on social media yesterday. I gather you'll be very happy as well. I can't get that excited. Yes, it's important, very important, but Biden himself still comes from a Democratic Party that's closely lined up with the military-industrial complex and the banks in the United States. So I wouldn't expect. I would look for more stability.
I think I'm happy Trump's gone, rather than Biden is about to come. He's a bit too right for me. I would rather have seen Bernie Sanders in there, but I don't think Bernie Sanders would have had a hope in hell of winning this election. Sort of my position would be anyone but Trump rather than Biden. But having listened to what I think 3 different speeches he's made, his line is, it doesn't matter whether it's a blue state or a red state, it's United States. So everything I'm hearing is that in his 47 years in the Senate, not including his time as VP, he's been a man that could get agreement across the aisle. So it may well be cometh the hour, cometh the man. We'll wait and see.
Well, we've still got at the moment until if Trump becomes polite and concedes defeat, which at the moment doesn't seem very likely. Seems to have gone straight into playing golf and got the hump.
I worry about that. I'm not convinced that there isn't more trouble to come.
Well, that is the big worry, of course, that he has incited hate and division across the United States of America in a way that no other president I can think of has, even all the way back to Wallace. But Wallace didn't become president, or Goldwater. I'm really taking you back, most people.
Yes, but remember Wallace got shot, didn't he? My worry is that there is an incident where guns are used, and Trump is well known for, well, out and out lying, shall we say. So if it's Trump supporters that open fire on Biden supporters And if it gets nasty and the Trump supporters get overwhelmed, he's still the man in power, remember, till January. So, you know, he can order out the National Guard, etc., etc.
Have we passed the point of no return where there was a point where there was a possibility of armed militia might invade the count in Pennsylvania, so they couldn't?
I think we're past that. But I mean, I suppose the beacon of light from the Republicans is nobody seems to be stepping up, apart from his tight inner circle. None of the Republican senators seem to be prepared to back him on his accusations. I mean, they'll go as far as saying, yes, he has every right to legally contest some of the counts and ask for recounts. But none of them are backing him openly, apart from Giuliani, who is not a senator.
He's a right.
It seems to be his family and people who are really close to him.
I'm glad you mentioned his family, because the long-term story is that Trump will continue to be a player, a very important player in American politics. And come the next election, Ivanka will be appointed as the candidate up against either Biden or Kamala Harris. And there's
I think more likely is the rumor that he's going to start his own TV station.
Well, he's got 88 million followers on Twitter. They would presumably, a huge amount of them will sign up subscription to his own TV station.
Well, there's that. So there's a money-making element to it for him. And I don't think he's got the depth to be political in any sense. Nothing he's done as president suggests to me that there's any nuance to the man at all. But sitting in front of a TV camera spouting the nonsense he's been spouting for the last 4 years, I think would be an easy job for him.
And he's got 70 million people voted for him, for crying out loud.
Yeah. So, I mean, from the point of view of raising the money to do it, I don't think he would have a problem. I think the money element of it will be possibly more appealing to him than.
And we thought the Tea Party were bad.
They were bad.
Yeah, well, we thought they were bad. Sarah Palin, shooting things from a helicopter.
Well, yeah, but at least the Tea Party sounded like they were mainstream political.
Well, the argument is effectively the Tea Party and Trump morphed together and have taken over the Republican Party. So, hey,
well, that seems to be the way of it.
What about the impact of this on us here in Scotland and the UK?
Well, I'm not sure there'll be an impact on Scotland. I'm very sure there'll be an impact on Ireland. Joe Biden considers himself Irish American, although he's, I think, 5 generations away from Ireland. But
his hometown hung out the flags over the weekend, apparently.
In Ireland, yeah.
Yes, Ballina. They had a big. His supporters had stuck up a billboard in the town centre, which was less than 25 square meters, which meant it didn't need a planning consent from the local council. And I thought that was a cunning Irish move.
Well, I think to really understand this, he's had official visits, but he's also had personal visits. So I think it matters to him on a personal level, not just a political level. So I would imagine that Boris will be rethinking his internal market.
Well, the argument is that tomorrow the House of Lords will be considering the internal market bill. Both the leader of the Labour Party and the Tories leaders in the Lords will both be supporting an amendment which will remove the contentious part of the bill in regard to the Irish border, the Good Friday Agreement, and
Well,
when it reaches the Commons, they won't reinsert it.
Well, it's the part of the bill that says they reserve the right to withdraw from international treaties, which is the part that that the Democrats have a problem with, because they think that would impact directly on the Good Friday Agreement.
It's not just that. I mean, that's a key part, but there's also things like the people said, was it one of Biden's team said Boris Johnson is a shape-shifting creep.
I think, I mean, some of them seem to have bought into this idea that Boris is a mini Trump. I don't agree with that. I don't think Boris is mainstream political. Okay, he's unusual in the way he acts sometimes, but I wouldn't put him in the same league as Trump.
Apparently,
he's just a Tory.
I saw Sophie Ridge this morning, and apparently she had problems getting. She had Dominic Raab on, who's Foreign Secretary.
Yeah.
And she said I had trouble dragging. The point was, what she wanted them was that the Prime Minister used to say on Friday whether all votes must be counted. You know, this going back to Friday before Biden had his projected majority. Basically, Sophie Ridge was saying that Dominic Raab was just not keen to support Biden until it was too late.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry, I don't see that as anything but sensible politics. Why would you come out for one or other of the antagonists in a presidential election until you knew who was going to win?
Well, let's put it this way: the foreign channels on there, like European Channel, Al Jazeera, and one or two others, summing up who had congratulated Biden early, included Merkel and Macron and the president of the EU. Boris was kind of late.
Well, I mean, they didn't congratulate him until CNN had called it, until it was beyond doubt. You know, I mean, they didn't pick a side. They congratulated the winner, which is exactly what the British government did. And it's a storm in a teacup. It means nothing. In fact, it's a diplomatic route to take.
Well, there is still the big question of a trade deal with the USA after Brexit.
Well, on Mar this morning, a possible equivalent of a foreign secretary to the Americans, who was he talked a lot of sense, answered questions fully. I was really quite impressed with him. He basically said, "You're not going to get a trade deal in 5 minutes."
But that was never going to happen anyway, was it?
No, I think we're now looking at a long road to an American trade deal, and I don't think it's got anything to do with malice. I think it's you're going back to what used to be acceptable political negotiation, and that takes time. I mean, Trump might well have come out and said, right, we're going to have a deal in 6 months, but that would have been the outlier. International trade deals do not take 6 months.
They take 7 years, don't they?
You know, I mean, even quick ones take years.
Sophie Ridge, the second part of her show, she had Sam Coates on, the political commentator for the Sky, talking about Brexit. And because basically she asked him what was in Boris Johnson's entry apart from the new president of the United States. And Sam said, well, it's getting Brexit done. 7 to 10, in practice, they've only got 7 to 10 days to agree a deal.
It was interesting that the talks were suspended till the result of the presidential election came through. Your point about the Lords possibly removing the international treaty paragraph from the internal market agreement is a way for the British government to align itself with the Democrats stance on this. So I think that's likely.
So what the other thing that Boris Johnson is at top of his end tray is Britain is totally unprepared for a no deal Brexit. The border is not ready.
I watch these adverts they've got on just now about being prepared for Brexit. Now, as nobody knows what Brexit is going to look like, not quite sure how businesses are supposed to prepare. It's a spin, an exercise in spin, as far as I'm concerned. Oh, we spent £20 billion on adverts telling you to get ready, and you ignored us. What we didn't do is tell you what the rules were, so you could get ready.
As far as I know, that companies that regularly trade across the channel, both directions, they have been placing stock either in Britain that needs to come to Britain, a couple of months extra stock, or the other way around, so that it won't have the same rush to get across the border.
Yeah, but you can't do that with fish.
You can't do that with fresh goods, and you can't do that indefinitely either. And it's costing money.
Yeah, so there's a big problem there. I would expect, well, the other article I saw today was, I think it was something you sent me actually, Stuart, that Sainsbury's was saying they're going to have problems getting fresh produce into Northern Ireland.
Yes, the headline just mentions Sainsbury's, but it also affects Tesco, Marks and Spencer, Asda. All these big supermarkets apparently will not be able to continue supplying fresh foods into Northern Ireland for quite a while.
Well, and I can't see. I think what the British government has done here is basically to refuse to take responsibility. Because as far as I can see, there is no contingency for those businesses that deal with fresh food. I mean, they're not putting a fast lane through Dover in place. Or if they are, they're not telling anybody they are. The whole thing is just a complete cock-up from start to finish.
Scotland's fresh fish goes straight off the boats through the fish markets into vans, lorries, which drive overnight all the way to Dover, straight across the ferry, and they sell them in markets in Belgium and France to continental wholesalers. That can't happen from the 1st of January.
Well, it can't happen till a vet has a look at the stuff and issues a certificate. That's the first thing. When it comes on shore, it has to be checked now, once we leave properly, it has to be checked and certified. And that costs money. Off the top of my head, I think it's about £60 a certificate. And I don't know what weight of fish that covers. But I mean, the whole thing is going to be a disaster. The good news for us is there might be a lot of cheap shellfish in the markets in Scotland.
Yeah, but how long are the fishermen going to keep fishing for shellfish if there isn't a big market for it? If they have to dump it in cheap prices in the UK?
I have no idea. I cross my fingers that Boris has got a deal on the table with China, so it can all be flown to China. But I don't think they have any idea. I genuinely think the British government is teeing up business to be blamed for this, where it's entirely their own lack of realization. I think they thought they were going to get a deal. And I actually still think there will be a deal.
I think they're going to have to just give in and to get some kind of a deal.
I think there will be a deal. I fully expect to see the EU getting its way both on fishing. There'll be tweaks. There'll be like annual reviews or whatever. but there'll be a clause in there saying if the EU aren't happy with it, it don't happen. And the level playing field. I can't see the EU not insisting on a level playing field of some sort.
It's not as though Boris hasn't got his troubles to seek. The management of this pandemic, and also, do you remember the Sunak postponed the budget?
Yeah.
And apparently they're having to deal with this in January. And what they were expecting to do, or what had been previously set up, was that a 3-year spending review is underway. So that's a fight amongst all the different departments on how much money they're getting to spend. Now, apparently they're going to replace that with a 1-year spending review.
Well, I just do not see how they're going to manage that in the middle of a pandemic. They can't know how much money they're going to have to spend on furlough. They'll be able to estimate it, but it could be millions of pounds either way.
They've got to say to the departments how much money they've got to spend for 2021.
Really? Why?
They need the money to call the departments.
All right. So the spending departments at Westminster, need money, but the devolved administrations don't.
Well, let's put it this way. We knew about the situation with the devolved administrations because of Scotland back in 2 or 3 months ago when they announced the delay of the budget.
Well, it's not 2 or 3 months ago, it's weeks ago. And they don't seem to be moving on that. The whole thing, the whole way they've treated Scotland. I mean, the piece by Tickell,
Andrew Tickell, reminded
me of the 6 years that Police Scotland and the fire brigades in Scotland had to pay VAT.
I forgot about that one, yeah. That's a handy bit, yes, he put that into... A good article by Andrew Tickell. He's never very far from the point, is he?
Well, I mean, we are a region, and not a very important region, which kind of neatly brings us to Peter Bell's.
Well, we are looking. I like the way Peter Bell. It's not every he writes so many articles. I can't agree with them every day, but today's article sums up the timetable that we face. We have an very important election next May. We have an important SNP conference on the 28th of this month, and now we have an assembly organised by AUOB next weekend, and a repeat, I think, a follow-up a week later. The reason why there's a timetable is that you've got, we've already seen the announcement of the SNP candidates. There's a list went out over the weekend, all the preferred candidates, so we've got a good idea of the shape of that. We also know that the proposal, the motion put forward by Angus Brendan McNeill and Chris McElhenney was quietly pushed aside into a national meeting sometime next year, rather than a motion at this conference. There's still a lot of disquiet about that. I think we probably have Peter on at some point. I'm almost certainly taking part in one of our shows this week. And get him to explain it himself in detail why it's so challenging. The one clear thing that Peter has on his side and whatever he says is that, on the one hand, it's like, what's it trying to do? It's like trying to herd cats, the Yes movement. And his strong case is that let's all just agree on the one thing: dissolve the union. Everything else we're going to disagree on because it'll be full of different policies. And on that point, I do agree. If you can herding cats, SNP, Yes movement.
Well, I broadly agree with what Peter's saying, which is pick the policy we all agree on and fight for that, as you've just said. But the other thing, and I'm still there, vote for the SNP, first and second vote. There's nothing come out of the alternative list parties, independent support and list parties. I've seen no manifestos. I've heard nothing about candidates. It's now November. It's too late now, as far as I'm concerned. So we need to get a majority, and it's got to be the SNP. The unionists, again, as Peter says, have already said that they're just going to ignore any other independent supporting party. So it has to be the SNP that gets the majority. The SNP need to come up with something to satisfy the wider yes movement. I'm not a gradualist. It turns out the gradualists have been right up to this point. But I think that we're near the point, if we do not have a referendum to coalesce around, we're going to start seeing the yes movement trickle away in different directions.
I think you're probably right. That's in that sense, there is an urgency needed. I mean, we are looking at the situation for a very important Holyrood election in May. To sum up, one of the points Peter makes, it suggests that after May, we're looking at a Tory government, a particular Tory government, but even the Labour Party, following the success of the SNP in 2011, getting a majority in Holyrood when that was never, and it was designed that should never happen. The motivation down south is simply to emasculate the independence movement in Scotland.
I mean, Alistair Jack interviewed in the telly this week. 25 or 40 years.
Now, what is the thinking behind saying that?
Well, the idea is that you take the wind out of the sails of the yes movement the longer that they refuse an independence referendum. And while that's happening, you use the rest of your 25 years to dismantle the boat, dismantle Holyrood, and just turn Scotland into the north.
What about
the north
that
of England?
What about that unusual article the other day where I suggested it was a secret plan with suddenly revealed by an extreme unionist, which was that as time goes by, independence becomes so embedded in Scottish culture that there's no way you can ever get rid of it, because the idea it's in with the bricks.
I'm sorry, if they do not take a chance on a referendum, the unionists, soon the demographics dictate, if they wait 25 years, there's going to be an 80% support for independence in Scotland.
Well, it depends on what kind of media we get. You know, they aren't
here. No, it doesn't. Sorry,
oh, yeah,
Stuart, it doesn't.
No, yes, no. I've got one piece of evidence. The suggestion is there are very few successful left-wing parties around the world. One in Portugal, one in New Zealand, and one of the reasons they've said that Jacinda Ardern has been successful, is it Ardern? Successful in New Zealand is there are no Murdoch. There's no Murdoch press in New Zealand. Don't forget the power of the media.
Yes, but you've done what the Tories want you to do again. This is not a left-wing movement. This is an independence movement. Now, it might look left-wing to you, but it doesn't to me. It's not a political party. Yeah, it's an independence movement. And when 3 people in a household of 4 support independence, that 4th one will come on board. And it will not, they're wrong. Waiting 25 years will change nothing unless they turn Scotland into London. Unless Scotland becomes hugely successful, massively richer than the rest of the UK.
It's not going to happen.
That isn't going to happen. No, the desire for independence will build, and it will keep building, and it will become part of the natural political life of the country.
So
And
that's
if they
the secret plan.
if they think they're dealing with grievance now, how do you think they're going to feel when 70% of the population want an independence referendum?
But that's the secret plan.
Well, the only argument they have now is the spurious argument that somebody once said in a pub behind closed doors in the dark at 3 a.m, once in a generation. It's written down nowhere. The exact opposite is written in every agreement. That referendum does not preclude another referendum, and no time scale that I've found exists. So if you want a referendum, lads, have a referendum. I agree with the SNP that the Section 30 is the gold standard to go to, but I'm quite prepared to have an illegal, if that's the way you want to refer to it, referendum, because I don't believe it is illegal for the people in Scotland to have a referendum on their status in the Union.
I see that Joanna Cherry has joined a group, Commonweal group inside the SNP, to set up a working group to consider an alternative, the Plan B motion that was not adopted for SNP conference.
I think I don't understand why they won't let it be discussed. I do understand why they won't let it be voted on, but I don't understand why they won't let it be discussed. Even to diffuse the situation, they don't have to act on it. Just because conference mandates you to do something doesn't mean you have to do it. But they're heading for trouble if they don't come up with another route.
Well, the alternative argument, of course, is the SNP critics of Plan B. They contend if the Prime Minister is not going to grant a Section 30, he is unlikely to enter independence talks, even if the referendum is won.
That's fine. Yes. That's okay by me. We walk away, we owe them nothing. I'm quite prepared to do that.
I'm not convinced that, according to the article I've read so far by Kathleen Nutt in the National, that what Joanna Cherry and the SNP Commonweal group are proposing, it doesn't look very hard. It looks like a bit wishy-washy. We'll wait and see what they actually propose. If they can propose an amendment to one of the, is it 4 or 6 all-encompassing motions that are going to the conference, they need to be clever to come up with an amendment that is tight. Well,
I mean, they can't, without a Plan B, set out in black and white, step by step. It's a bit difficult to be anything but wishy-washy. I mean, I think it basically says that a Plan B should be created in secret if necessary, without alerting our enemies, I think was what the National said.
I quite like that.
Oh, dear. But there has to be a methodology. I've, as you know, I mean, my thing on this is let's renegotiate the Treaty of Union.
Well, yeah.
And if they refuse to renegotiate it, let's walk away from it.
Yeah, dissolve it. Yes, you're right about that. To set up a group to work on gaming a copper-bottom strategy, the details of which need not be advertised to the enemy.
Exactly. Now, you know, there's another couple of ways to go about it, but we should start because it puts pressure on Westminster. We should start. The SNP, the Government of Scotland, should start speaking to the UN, to the European Court of Human Rights. I mean, whoever will listen. Well, should start doing it.
To rewind slightly, does that put Scotland's independence more likely that now that Biden has become the president-elect?
I would be very surprised if a president who objects to Brexit thinks independence for Scotland is a good idea.
Yeah, they don't want to start, from their point of view, they don't want to see a chain reaction of independence groups
Yeah.
across Europe.
And the argument there is unification of Ireland is not independence for Northern Ireland. So they are two different things.
I can tell you when you're being provocative.
Well,
Mr. Stewart.
Northern Ireland becoming independent is a whole different thing to the reunification of Ireland.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. You know, I think the American Democrats would argue that that is bridging the divide, whereas independence for Scotland, I think they would argue, is division. It would be interesting to see if he comments at all on it.
The idea of independence for Northern Ireland struck me as rather odd. I watched some of the service at the Cenotaph on television, and one or two things struck me about the great and the good that were offered, that had the chance to lay a wreath. And there was someone for the Crown dependencies, one for the overseas territories. Winding back a little bit, there was the politicians. There was the Prime Minister and Keir Starmer for the opposition, Ian Blackford for the SNP and Plaid Cymru, Ed Davey for the Lib Dems, and somebody called the Right Honourable Sir, I forget his name now, but he was described as the only one that was described as the Right Honourable and Sir was the leader of the DUP, and I couldn't figure out why he got his titles.
Maybe he's ex-army. Who knows? Any other highlights of today?
There's a very, very short clip that I'd like to show you.
Okay. Oh, is this the Biden clip?
Very short. I'll line it up if you make it.
Make sure you click the speech button.
Yep, I'll click the speech button, share computer sound, share, and I'll start at the beginning. Okay, dokie, here we go.
Mr. Biden, a quick word for the BBC.
Yeah. The BBC, I'm Irish.
Mr. Biden, a quick word for the BBC.
Yeah. The BBC, I'm Irish.
Mr. Biden, a quick word for the BBC.
Yeah. The BBC, I'm Irish.
Did he have to say it 3 times?
Well, I thought it was so quick. It did. I felt he had to say it 3 times. I've got a picture as well. Where is it gone? Don't go there.
What are you doing?
With that one, there's a picture, which people might be keen to see. I think the United Kingdom. Look, I learned from Scottish friends. The last thing to do is to suggest to a Scot what he should do. Scotland's democratic will must be respected. So it's maybe time to send our ambassador to meet him.
From the famous grouse beater. And I've got one screen share from Mr. Hutton, who is out pounding the tarmac today.
Best of luck, Jimmy.
Jimmy stayed kind of local, but here's his message. Where's it gone? Here we are. Canny mate today, guys. Sorry, but could one of you voice my suspicion that the newly opened testing facilities in Edinburgh, such as the one at Leith Library, open today, are part of a cynical attempt to up the numbers in the Lothians because this government doesn't want to take the decision to put Edinburgh into 2-tier while Glasgow is in 3-tier. I need to point out to Jimmy 2 things. One is, nah, didn't believe that. The other one is, they're no tiers, they're levels.
And levels.
But Jimmy has convinced himself that Edinburgh is doing much better than Glasgow.
The there is apparently a report over the weekend that things are not looking good in Fife. So that seems it could be up to level 3, which wouldn't be terribly surprising. It would join up the rest of the Central Belt more or less to Dundee, which is out on a bit of a limb, apart from the Tay Bridge, of course. There is also a possibility that East Lothian might be dropped to Tier 2 from Tier 3. It's possible now that we're split into local authority areas and not a health board.
Well, we'll no doubt get news on that tomorrow afternoon. I haven't looked at the figures this weekend, actually. I decided to just basically couch potato out in front of CNN. A few of their reporters and presenters really do not like Trump very much. and they're not
Yes,
scared
they've
to
not
say
been,
so.
Yes, they've not been on the best of friends for quite a long time.
Well, I enjoyed watching CNN as a bit of a breath of fresh air compared to our media. I won't say they weren't biased, but I will say they were truthful. Put it that way.
All the way from Atlanta, they're
Yes.
headquartered.
Yes. So I think we'll call it a day at that, Stu. You happy with that?
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining me, Stuart Lockhead. I'm Norrie Stewart. Hopefully we'll get Jimmy Hutton pride out of his black cab for Monday, but I wouldn't bet on it. Thanks for listening, folks, and we'll catch you on Monday. Cheers for now.